to tell you about shocking case history documented by Sigmund Freud's greatest rival was 50 years in the making. The story behind it was suppressed for twice that long because the medical establishment didn't want you to know about it. The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. Pre-order a copy on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Boston, 1898. Clara Fowler arrives at the office of renowned psychotherapist Dr. Morton Prince, plagued by visions, exalted by apparitions of the Virgin Mary, cursed by a demonic presence obsessed with her demise. A city marshal pursues Clara, hell-bent on pinning the murders of her infant siblings on her father and uncovering their connection to the serial killings of Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes. What happens next is more shocking than the grizzled lawman could ever imagine. The Unwelcomed by Ron Felber. Pre-order on Amazon or where books are sold.
Welcome to Paranormal Gateway Paratalk. My name is Scott Wise, and I'm the host. Our special guest tonight is Ron Felber, an award-winning author. Tonight, we talk with Ron about his journey from true crime nonfiction to a demonic possession from his latest book, due release May 30th, called The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler. So without further ado, let's welcome Ron to the show.
How you doing there, Scott?
Thanks. Hey, you're here. Yep.
Thank you for the great introduction.
Yeah. I made it short and sweet.
No, but actually, I appreciate you showing the videos in advance. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, no big deal. No problem. So, first thing to ask, how did you go from that to demonic possession or what? It's two different writing styles. How did you even think about doing that?
You know, that's a really good question. I started out writing like detective novels, and actually I was writing like spy type novels, and I did the Nick Carter series, which was you're in the military. A lot of military guys would read Nick Carter. It was sort of the American James Bond. So I was doing these sort of adventure spy novels and thrillers and those kinds of things. But then I came across a book that you read, a story that you read called The Mojave Incident. So I ran across my first real story about the paranormal. And this was about an alien abduction case that was really, quite incredible. And from there, really, I started to get an interest in this. And then I recalled that when I was in college, way back in 1972, when they were filming The Exorcist at Georgetown University, where I was a student, Bill Blatty told me about, the author of The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, told me about a story in Boston about this demonic possession. And he said it was incredibly well documented. And so that's what caused the leap. I thought back to 50 years ago when this story was given to me by Bill Blatty. And I said, it was a difficult story to write because it takes place at the turn of the 20th century, 1898 to 1904. And it was hard to write. And I didn't think I could do it then. But I said, I've been writing for a long time now. Let me give this a try. And it turned out to be what I think is my best book. And it turned out to be The Unwelcomed, The Curious Case of Clara Fowler.
Wow. Yeah, looking into your research and stuff, like I said, you're with Will Blatty. It helped you through that. Now, do you, I started doing some writing back a little while, and I tons of notes and stuff I jot down. Did you have a mess in your manuscript or anything when you were doing crossing stuff off and
Yeah, my desk is not a pretty sight, Scott. As a matter of fact, I tend to write longhand. Now, you'll see like a Stephen King, if you see some video of Stephen King writing, you'll see him pounding away at a laptop, or maybe even a typewriter. But I started writing that way, but then when you get to a more complicated story and the sentence structures get more complicated, I find that writing longhand it gives me more freedom to change things and to get exactly the right word, circle something and make an arrow. And, so if you see the page when I'm done with it, it looks like some abstract modern art or something, but I can read it.
You have freedom.
At least I can read it. That's the good news.
Well, stared out that plate of it to people.
Yeah, exactly. A whole new career, right? As an artist.
There you go. Yeah. So I think you said something about Stephen King, but was there any particular author books that influenced your writing style?
Yeah. Well, this story involves Jack the Ripper and H.H. Holmes, the America's first serial killer. And I would say, really, if you ask me, particularly for this book, my biggest influence was certainly William Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist and who wrote Legion after that. The style, it suits the story. And so his style suits the story. And so you'll see in my book a lot of the stylistics, a lot of the techniques that Bill Blatty used in The Exorcist, I use in my book as well, just because they work. And it's not long sentences; it's short staccato sentences that keep the pace of the book moving, and are particularly suited for dialogue. Where you have this demonic presence talking to this doctor, and it's some of the dialogue which comes from real transcripts. The case was studied in Boston, 1898 to 1904, by Dr. Morton Prince, who was a very high-level doctor, Harvard professor, Harvard Medical School professor. The famous William James, who was really taught at Harvard, taught abnormal psychology. He was the first to bring abnormal psychology into the universities as a topic and into medical schools. So it was made up, the team that studied Clara Fowler was Dr. Morton Prince, was George Waterman, also a Harvard Medical School graduate who was his assistant. Then you had William James, and then just for good measure, you had two spiritualists. So three hard-nosed scientists and two spiritualists, one Leonora Piper, who was a clairvoyant, one of the famous clairvoyants at the time, and a fellow named Dr. Richard Hodgson, who was president of the American Psychical Research Society.
Yeah.
That's hard to say.
That's what I was doing. You got it right.
But Prince's idea was to surround this with different points of view. So part of the book really is sort of this debate that goes on between the materialists, the scientists, and behavioralists, and the spiritualists, and whether this is demonic possession or a psychiatric ailment that had never been diagnosed before. So you have this woman who comes in with all the symptoms of demonic possession. Her face remolds. Her voice turns into that of a man. She's incredibly violent, goes into rages about anything religious, claims to be the devil, hates the woman that whose body it's in, and actually writes threatening letters to her, tries to do anything to weaken the body. So, for example, Clara Fowler couldn't eat. When she ate, the demon would have the food be filled with maggots. When she tried to sleep, she'd have horrible nightmares, so that she was afraid to go to sleep. So in wearing the body down, the demonic presence came to the realization that it could come more easily, could take over the body more easily when she was fatigued. And so it was really a torture that this woman went through. And the team of scientists and spiritualists, studied it from different angles. Prince came out with the diagnosis of a new disease, which was called dissociation. And so he wrote a book called Dissociation of a Personality. But of course, Hodgson and Leonora Piper and even William James thought that this was a legitimate case of demonic possession that couldn't be explained in medical terms.
Well, that's why I came about that name, dissociation.
Yeah.
They didn't want to call it possession.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta give it a name.
Exactly. That's a very good point, because a lot of times what people do and science does is give a name to something. This is what we name it. It doesn't mean we understand it. It just means this is what we call it. So if you have a set of symptoms that are as I say, she even in the demonic state, they did testing. She would feel no pain. She had no need of food, no need of sleep, would not be fatigued, was awake 24/7 and knew the thoughts and desires and every little peculiarity about Clara Fowler, and used it against her in this battle for the body.
And the other thing about back in the thing couldn't understand was epilepsy, too. They thought that could be like demonic possession or whatever.
Yeah.
So back then I think of the Catholic priests or other priests were not too quick to go to those places either. Because like some don't believe in demons. So
yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, as far as epilepsy, yeah. I mean, epilepsy, Tourette syndrome, schizophrenia, multiple personality, all of those things, they're pretty much eliminated to this extent. When you get these symptoms, again, talks in a different voice, a man's voice, explosive voice, speaks languages that she should have no knowledge of, Greek, Latin. This is crazy. Feels no pain, is clairvoyant. Actually, the demon in the demonic state, they would have physical confrontations, the doctors with this violent, entity. And during one of them, the demonic presence says to Prince, "You will lose the thing you love most." And this is just before they etherize her, which means take ether, put it over her mouth and nose, and literally make her unconscious. Just before she goes unconscious, you will lose the thing that you love most. Well, Prince had a prize horse named Garland that was his pride and joy. He rode it almost every day. And it wound up the next morning getting hit by a car and was killed. And so, these kinds of coincidences, these kinds of, moments of clairvoyance, if you put all the symptoms together, the odds of somebody having all of these symptoms at one time in the same place, in the same person, are remote. And Hodgson's argument was it's more likely that an entity has entered this body that has all of these peculiarities, then this person has an illness. For example, it would be like having measles, chicken pox, rheumatic fever, and a cold all at the same time. It could happen, but the odds of all of those symptoms at the same time, the same person, are remote. And that's the conclusion they came to.
Wow. A lot of people don't believe in heaven or hell. What if there's demons, then there's angels too. So
that's a really good point. And maybe, do you mind if I read a short section from the book?
Oh, it's good for it. Yeah,
it absolutely covers that base, because, like I said, there's this sort of argument. So this is Hodgson, who is the spiritualist, and Prince, who is the scientist, the doctor. So Prince says to him, Throughout the ages, diseases of the mind had been falsely labeled demonic possession by those who would have us believe supernatural entities creep into the natural world, ghosts, witches, devils. Have we learned nothing from the work of Charcot on the pathology of hysteria and epilepsy? Think for a moment about the poor souls subjected to unspeakable tortures, women burned at the stake, here in Massachusetts no less, in the name of religion and belief in evil incarnate, when as Tourette proved, the symptoms associated with Tourette syndrome have nothing to do with demons and everything to do with a chemical imbalance in the brain. Now Hodgson, listen, please, he urged. We have a set of symptoms manifested by a second consciousness. As proved by you, it takes possession of Miss Fowler's body, claiming to be spirit, despises her, threatens her, and has driven her to the brink of destruction. Given these facts, one can label her disorders anything one chooses, but a name doesn't explain a phenomenon that's existed in every corner of the world for thousands of years. Gregory of Tours, who reported the possession of a young girl who took on not only the voice but the appearance of a Persian man who died decades before. The 17th century case of Elizabeth Knapp, who read her exorcist's thoughts, predicting future events through messages spontaneously erupting on her body. And today, the anthropologist Junot's account of a possessed woman in Africa who vanished from her home one night and was found the following morning on top of a tall tree. Afterwards, she glided down head first, flicking her tongue in and out like a snake. She then hung suspended for a time and began to speak in a language later identified as Aramaic. How do you account for these? He says, Prince now. Anecdotes. That's what you're putting forward, Hodgson. Where are the doctors? Where are the clinicians, scientists who would document these stories? Without that, we have what we always have in spiritualist arguments. Hearsay, fraud, misunderstood symptoms leading to misdiagnosis and mythology. To that I say, angels, ghosts, hobgoblins, show me your face. Hodgson steps up to him pleading. Don't you see, Morton? Can you not bring yourself to understand the great mystery we stand on the threshold of solving? I beg you, consider at least the possibility that here at last in the city of Boston, 1898, is tangible evidence of transcendence. If there are demons, there must be angels, and probably a God and a life everlasting. You ask, where are the doctors and clinicians? Dr. Prince, we are the doctors. We are the clinicians. So just to your point, if there's devils, there's angels. And if there's devils and angels, there's a God. And if there's a spiritual life afterwards, there must be transcendence for human beings. And this is like really the great mystery of life.
Right. And there's a supreme being.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah. It's evidence of a supreme being.
And also other, I'm sure there's other galaxies out there too, that have their own thing going on.
More and more, I was watching, there's an astrophysicist, I always get his name wrong, but I'll try. His last name is Kaku, so I think it's Michio Kaku. He's Japanese. In any case, he says that, these telescopes, the Hubble telescope and the new one that they have, when you see these pictures of like massive amounts of stars, that's only like a little pinhole that the camera is catching.
Right.
That it's unimaginable how many universes, galaxies. There are like millions of galaxies, millions of universes that we know about now that we had no clue about maybe 20 years ago. And it makes you say, maybe we don't know much about reality at all. And maybe there really is this massive struggle that goes on between God and demons, angels and demons, with human beings sort of in the middle, as a prize to be won by either side.
All right. No, that makes sense.
It makes sense to me, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause that's what I think is like. Or first started with ghost hunting and back when I first started
Mm-hmm.
interested in this was, well, first in high school. Everybody thought I was nuts reading all the books on they call that kind of stuff, but I was reading that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like Hans Holzer, I love the his stuff. And that's what really got me starting ghost hunting and getting out there and the things I've seen and heard and I mean, unless you witness it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you know, then you're like, nah, there's just these ghosts, nah, there's just spirits, nah, there's just these phantoms, there's such thing as devils, and it's not. I mean, there's evil spirits. I found out already because I've been called nasty names already by them
Mm-hmm.
many times. And I'm a nice guy. I don't get it.
Yes, yes.
We get to a place and we're like, okay, hi, it's me, I'm back, and whatever, and they usually get a nice response.
Uh-huh.
But just talk about the evil, good thing
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, the other thing that I found interesting, maybe you saw these hearings in Congress about UFOs and alien abduction and all
Oh,
that.
yeah, I saw it. I got to testifying.
Yes,
The
yes, yes.
pilot, the pilot.
Well, the pilot, but then there was this guy Grush. It was a high-level intelligence officer
yeah.
who claimed there were alien bodies and alien craft that had been recovered. But you know, he didn't call them extraterrestrial. He called them interdimensional beings,
Beings, yep.
interdimensional entities. But you know, if you think about it, ghosts are interdimensional entities. Angels are interdimensional entities.
Yep.
Devils are interdimensional entities. And so it occurred to me that maybe all of this stuff is connected somehow. You know, that there's this sort of spiritual world or other dimensions, and that maybe we just don't see it because our vision is so limited. You know,
Or
what we
third eye.
yeah, our vision is so limited.
Yeah.
But reality may well include an incredible spiritual dimension that we're unaware of, and that occasionally we get a peek into. You know, somebody sees an entity,
Yeah.
somebody sees a ghost, somebody
Yeah.
has this experience like Clara Fowler of demonic possession.
I got lucky for seeing stuff. But we don't lose all of our brain, so it's still.
I think they say 10% or less. So it's a small
Yeah.
percentage. I know that.
Yeah. So I think of that every opened up, we all see past what we're seeing now.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I was reading a book. I don't know if maybe you saw it or heard of it. It's an old book. It's called Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. And he was experimenting back. Let me think about when this might have been. I would say the 40s, something like that. And maybe even before that, the 30s. And he was experimenting with LSD and peyote and those kinds of things. And he came to the conclusion that the human brain, you and I would think, you see things and the brain interprets it. He said the real function of the brain is to shield us from reality.
Oh, wow, I think about that.
Because if we saw everything as it really is, it would blow our mind. We wouldn't be able to function. And so the brain screens out much of reality so that we can eat, find food, sleep, procreate, the basic evolutionary things. Because if we saw reality as it was, it would just be overwhelming.
What was the name of the book?
It's called Doors of Perception.
Okay. I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna probably get that. I
It's
love
around.
reading.
Yeah, it's around. I read it years and years ago, and then it occurred to me, well, maybe I'll take a look at that again because it was interesting. And when you're young and you read things,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the same meaning when 30 years later you read it again and say, oh, now I get what this, what Huxley's talking about.
Right. That's not by Huxley. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely check that one out. So I love reading stuff like that, and keeps me busy during the day when I'm not working on podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we could maybe I didn't want to get too much into new book coming out, but can you share anything else from it, or
Yeah,
just
yeah. I'll tell you, basically, this is the story. So there's this Radcliffe student, Radcliffe College in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, I think in Cambridge. And she starts, well, actually, she's very saintly. She's very religious. She is going to school, studying literature and whatnot, but ultimately she wants to go into a convent and be a nun. She's 22 years old. She goes to church quite often. She has visitations from the Blessed Virgin and from Jesus Christ. And so this is, to her, this is like a religious phenomenon that she's experiencing, and she thinks she has a calling to be a nun and devote her life to to the Catholic faith. Fine. All of a sudden, she starts to have no appetite. Then she starts to have dreams, and the dreams are subtle at first, but then really terrifying. Dreams where she's surrounded by robed figures, demonic figures, marching marching in a procession. She's on an altar, where Satan's being worshipped. She she well, she has visions of a rape, being raped by men with animal masks and this and that, and just awful. She can't go to sleep. Really, at the end, these dreams are so terrifying that she's left in a cold sweat, just shuddering in her bed. And so she says, "I'm afraid to go to sleep." So she's not sleeping. Then I mentioned to you, when she tries to eat, she looks at her food and like she sees maggots coming out of it. And so she doesn't eat. So now she has an ailment that in those days they called neurasthenia. And neurasthenia was the symptoms of it were lack of appetite, insomnia, sexual dysfunction, those kinds of things, leading to almost catastrophic fatigue. So she goes to a regular doctor, Dr. James Jackson Putnam, who is, again, a Boston Brahmin, very high society, this is all Beacon Hill in Back Bay, Boston. And while he is dealing with her and thinking, all right, well, this is neurasthenia, exercise, better diet, maybe something to help her sleep, sleeping pills, that kind of thing. But none of it works. And then he finds that she starts talking to him in a way like this. If he'll say, you will sleep well at night, she'll say, she's not going to sleep well at night, but in a man's voice.
oh, okay.
You will have a healthy appetite. She will not have a healthy appetite. So then the doctor goes, why are you calling her she? Because I hate her. Mm-hmm. And then the voice changes, the face changes, just remolds to a different face, this violent face with eyes that are just combing the room. And she goes, who are you? The guy is aghast, who are you? I am the devil and I want her dead. So the general practitioner says, this is way beyond my pay grade. So he knows that Dr. Prince and William James, the Harvard Medical School lecturers and professors and practitioners of psychotherapy, deal with abnormal psychology. So he writes a letter, which I have in my book. It's a note. And basically it says, I'm turning her over to you because this is, I really have no expertise in this area. If truth be known, and you asked me, and this was medieval times, what's wrong with her? I would say she's possessed by a demon. You have to deal with it. You figure out what's wrong. But if you're asking me what's wrong, I know it sounds crazy, but I think she's got an entity that has entered her body and that despises her. So Prince takes her on, and really that's really the beginning of the book. So this woman that's had these visitations from Christ and from the Virgin Mary, who's extremely morbidly religious, is now being attacked by a demonic presence that says she'll never be a nun while I'm around, you know, and really torments the host, because it finds out that when she's weakest, it's strongest, and when it's strong, there are actual dialogues that go on between Prince and the demonic presence that are just stunning, you know.
And say about medieval times how they did torture then. That was
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. And there's another element, Scott, to the book, which makes it almost like a sort of a detective or psychological thriller, because Clara Fowler's two siblings died as infants, and the coroner tells the city marshal, I think they were murdered. I think they were strangled to death. And I think it was the father. The father, Clara Fowler's father, was abusive. He was an alcoholic. He was a wife beater and an all-around terrible guy. And so Rufus Bassett Hilliard, who's the city marshal, who actually investigated the Lizzie Borden murders, he's the Fall River city marshal, and the Juan Carriaro murders, because Juan Carriaro also committed an axe murder very nearby Lizzie Borden's home in a farm 3 miles away within 6 months, the same area. Bassett investigated both murders and suspected that John Fowler had killed the siblings of Clara Fowler. So he goes to Boston hoping to get her to testify against her father. You know, what did you see? You know, it's a small house that they lived in, a cabin almost. What happened? How did they die? And he's thinking that he can get Clara Fowler to testify against her father. But then he finds out when he gets there that she's being treated for something that certainly resembles demonic possession. And this throws a whole different light on the story.
Yeah, I know about the second one. I have to look it up now.
Yeah. It's a terrifying story. It's really spooky, and it involves a satanic cult, and that's really the genesis of Clara Fowler's either demonic possession or dissociative state. But she saw her brother and sister being killed, and her father was part of a satanic cult. So this all becomes just a horrifying set of circumstances, with this girl trapped in the middle, a detective trying to get to the bottom of these murders, and a doctor trying to cure her of this incredibly destructive, murderous phenomenon.
Well, no wonder she was having dreams of the road with black robes and stuff. I saw her dad, right?
Yeah, I mean, her father was the suspect, and I don't want to give away too much of the plot. But
no, it's just there's still, because.
But I can tell you this, and this is a really interesting and true thing. The detective, the city marshal, who is Hilliard, Rufus Bassett Hilliard, gets a letter from Jack the Ripper, and it's in the museum in Fall River, an actual letter from Jack the Ripper to him, telling him how to solve these crimes. And one of the things he says is, "There's more than one murderer."
Wow.
So I mean, it's really an incredible story. I mentioned that William Blatty gave it to me, but he looked at it as a research issue. So when he was researching cases of demonic possession, this stood out because there were so many famous doctors involved, and it was documented so well. But what he didn't do, which I had the luxury over many, many years, I hired a detective, to get to the bottom, not just of the exorcism, and that's what he was writing about, but in my process of research, I uncovered much, much more. I uncovered the death of the two siblings, the murder of the two siblings. I uncovered the detective that was involved. I uncovered the fact that Morton Prince was in a rivalry with Sigmund Freud for the direction that psychiatry would take. Freud wanted to go to psychoanalysis, and that's what he believed in, dreams, the interpretation of dreams, etc. Prince was a behavioralist. He believed that if you're schizophrenic or if you're, have Tourette syndrome or whatever, that it's a function of the brain. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's a lesion in the brain. It stems from something physical, not psychological. And so there was a real battle between what they would call a materialist and psychoanalysis. And also, by the way, in the middle, I suppose, would be spiritualists. And there were 9 million spiritualists in the United States and in Europe at the time.
It was big things back then too. With their first movie when they started with like Sarah Winchester and
Yes.
had the seances and
Well, actually, at the time, you had Charles Dickens, the famous writer, was a spiritualist and believed in clairvoyance, believed in mediums. Madame Curie, who discovered X-rays, was also a spiritualist. There were others. Sir Joseph Lodge, who was a famous physicist at the time, was a spiritualist. But there were others. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes series, believed in mediums, believed in that you could contact the dead. So there was a big movement that, from Prince's point of view, was really holding psychiatry back. So the last thing he wanted was to say, "Oh, she's possessed by a demon." No, that wouldn't fly. Hodgson believed that. James sort of was in the middle, but he had to prove that this was a psychological ailment, and he named it dissociation, which, by the way, now it proves that in some ways he was really right, because what they used to call multiple personality, now they call, a dissociative disorder.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Based on his theories. And his theory was that it all would come back to a catastrophic trauma. That if you or I, let's say me, let's say that when I was 5, I had this catastrophic trauma, maybe sexual assault. A lot of them come back to sexual assaults or some violent thing. You saw your parents murdered or something in front of you. These things would separate because you couldn't take the reality, the horror that you witnessed. You would dissociate yourself. So there would be this sort of phantom being that would be called Ron Felber that would go through day to day, but the real personality would be subsumed and hiding.
Right.
And so you have basically two personalities. Prince's theory was that in her case, because she was religious, when that happened, she had the saint, morbidly religious, and the demon, morbidly evil. And so that was his theory.
With the trauma of stuff like that, I myself, I don't know how I'd handle it. Being that young.
Yeah, that's right. And as it turned out, there was significant trauma in her life, and it boils down to like the death of her siblings, and also the fact that she was involved with these demonic, this satanic cult, and certainly that is fertile ground for a psychological ailment. But again, when you have so many symptoms, and And by the way, it's a satanic cult. You know, this is Paranormal Gateway, right? What's more of a gateway to the devil than a satanic cult?
Right.
You know, it's like a super highway into somebody's life.
Right. Yeah, but I have a ghosting group called Ghosty Gateway.
Oh, is that right? Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I always do is just ghosts and stuff for that. And I can't wait to read your book. And
I appreciate that.
I'm definitely gonna put it on hold and stuff. But what about so now you are in this type of writing? Are you gonna stay true to the true crime and stuff, or are you gonna try more of the, the hard question?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'll tell you. You want to hear? You want to hear what something interesting? Since you brought it up. So obviously, the unwelcome is what's on my mind right at the moment, and I'm really happy about it. I'm delighted how well it came out, and I think people are going to love it. I think it's going to scare the hell out of them too. But I did this alien abduction book, and so let me tell you a quick sort of story. About 30 years ago, I lived near the beach with my wife, no children at the time, and I had a dog. And so since I lived near the beach, the airport was quite a distance. I was traveling a lot, and so I would walk the dog very early in the morning, because then I had to drive to the airport and all that rigmarole. And so I would walk the dog at maybe 4:30 in the morning, maybe even 4 in the morning, and get off to work maybe at 5 or so to catch flights and stuff. So the beach was on one side, to my right, let's say, and to my left was a pond. And so I had this dream, and in the dream, it was winter, and I was walking with the dog by the pond, and I looked down into the pond, and I saw this large disc, glowing disc. And so it was cold, really. I mean, it's really cold. And God knows what the water was like. I mean, just probably slightly above freezing. But I had this compulsion to jump in the water and go to the craft. It was clearly, to me, it was something like a UFO. So I did in the dream. I left the dog. I looked at my watch, which had stopped, by the way. And I went into the water. The next thing I knew, I was in this spacecraft. So these alien beings take me around. They actually show me maps and explain things to me. And I found the whole experience kind of wondrous. It put me in an incredibly good mood. So I left in the craft. And next thing I knew, in my dream, I was standing with the dog leash in my hand. My clothes were dry, which was amazing to me. I'm feeling around. And my watch had started again. But it was off. It started, but there was maybe an hour missing. So it's a dream. So I didn't really think much of it, except to say, and this was before Mojave incident, before any interest in UFOs or anything like that. So, all right. But I felt incredibly exhilarated for almost a week, maybe 2 weeks. I just had this great feeling. So I forgot about it, but I can obviously, the dream stuck in my mind. I can tell you, every detail. Then I wound up with the Mojave incident through a guy that worked for me at the time. I was in New Jersey. He was in California. His best friend was a football player that they played college football together. And he had had this alien abduction experience with his wife. So the guy says, I know you're a writer. I've got this story. I said, well, I'm not really interested in UFOs and all like that. I do my spy novels, and I have a, pretty good thing going here. And I don't want to get distracted from it. No, you've got to meet these people. They don't really want to talk about it, but he's my best friend, and I know he needs to talk about it. They have sleepless nights, sexual dysfunction, all of the, they're like POWs, they're just no interest in work. This experience has changed their life. So reluctantly, I meet them. I get to know them. I write the Mojave incident, which was far afield from me. And it does quite well. And I get interested in this sort of thing. So then, in the interim, I had to have knee surgery. So I had a knee surgery, fine, meniscus kind of thing. A lot of people have it, no big deal. Then I had a more serious, I had a motorcycle accident. So I had to go back and get my knee operated again 5 years later. And the doctor goes to me after the surgery. He goes, there's an interesting thing that I uncovered on your x-ray. And I said, what's that? So he held it up. And on the dark x-ray, there's this shining piece of metal that's about the size of your pinky fingernail. Not big, but silver. And really evident because it's so black. The x-ray is so black, the silver it sticks out like a white light. I said, what's that? He goes, I don't know. So what do you mean you don't know? He goes, I tried to get it out. It's a piece of metal of some kind, I think. He said, I saw it there and I tried to get it out, but I couldn't. And I didn't want to dig too much, dig around too much and injure your knee. But, but that's what it is. I said, so what could it be? He said, well, maybe they left a clip in, but it doesn't look like a clip, by mistake in your last surgery. Maybe the tip of a surgical instrument broke off, which sounds pretty unlikely. He said, so basically I don't really know. I said, well, is it dangerous? He goes, well, you've had it in your knee for years now. It's not infected. I guess just leave it in. I just wanted you to know about it. So then about 3 months ago, I'm watching this show on UFOs and alien abduction. Maybe, I don't know what it was. Maybe Unsolved Mysteries or something like that. And this fellow that says he was abducted says, and by the way, I had an implant in my knee. And so my ears perk up. And he goes and literally shows the x-ray to the narrator of the show. And this is the x-ray. And I look at the x-ray and go, that's my x-ray. That's exactly what I have. That's exactly what I have. So then I was thinking about it, and that just bowls you over a little bit. Do you know what I mean? You go like, wow.
Yeah.
So there was a psychiatrist that I worked with on the Unwelcomed. He gave me a nice review for the book and became a kind of a friend. So I said, do you do retrogressive hypnosis? So he said, yeah. He says, I haven't done it in a while, but, I'm trained to do that. And I did it in the past. I just don't do much of it now. I told him the story. So would you retrogress me back 30 years ago to that dream? Because I have a sneaking hunch that maybe there's more to it than just a dream. Mm-hmm. And I have this thing in my knee, and I want to know how it got there. It got there somehow. And I wonder if it's connected with the dream and that this is some kind of tracking device like this fellow had talked about on the show. He said, I'll do it. He said, I'm going to take a course, a refresher course. And in May, I'm going to Tampa, Florida, to his office where we'll spend a couple of days videotaping my retrogressive hypnotic session that takes me back to that dream 30 years ago and potentially where this piece of metal or whatever it is. And if it turns out that the dream has, a concrete basis, like something really happened and it was more than a dream, I'll go to a surgeon and get that removed and see what it is.
That'd be something else.
That may be my next book.
Yeah. So it doesn't show up or beep when you go see the airport thing?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? I don't know. We'll just have to see. But
it's beep.
But I would call the book. I would call the book Truth.
Skim my knee.
Yeah, really. I would call the book Truth because if you think about it, it's a sort of an answer or a truth you've kind of been searching for somehow, maybe for 30 years, you know?
All right. I mean, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, maybe nothing will come of it. I mean, I would
Right.
say that the odds are,
Right.
probably, I don't know, 50 to 1, that it was just a dream and these are coincidences. But, that's what a writer does, is to explore possibilities. And if you smell a story and you say, well, maybe this is something much larger than what it seems, that could be the next story that I tell. Except
Right.
I'll be the main character.
There you go. And also some shows that when they took that out, it disintegrated. Once the oxygen hit, it disintegrated.
Do you know what happened with this guy? And by the way, there was another. So that was one story, and I started watching these shows pretty regularly then because I was really interested. And then there was a military guy, very very similar, very very similar, military fellow, had this UFO experience as a kid, maybe 8 or 9, something like that. Then in the military had another UFO type experience, and he had something in his knee, and he and had the X-ray, went to take it out, and it disappeared. Now, I mean, that sounds kind of convenient, I guess, but I mean, that's what he says happened, and this is a high-level military fellow. I mean, I don't know why he'd be lying.
Right. And it takes balls to knock out. Cause I know back in the crash at Roswell, everybody was hush hush. And,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
uh,
And that's the story, not just in Roswell. It's the story generally.
yeah,
Men in Black, all like that.
yeah, and the renders and farce into it.
Yes, yeah, yes, absolutely, right. Yeah.
That fascinates me. I love reading about that kind of stuff.
I think a lot of people do. I think people are fascinated. And maybe they're fascinated just because they're fascinated, but maybe they're fascinated because they know there's something inside them that tells them there's some truth there. There's some mystery that the answer lies inside, and that you're constantly striving to figure out, why are we on Earth? What is our purpose? Who put us here? What is this all about? I mean, these are the questions that serious people ask. And I think that people go to religion, they go to philosophy, whatever, they go to science. But at the end, there is this need within everyone that's human, like to answer those basic questions. And other than that, we sort of just wander around and live our lives without those questions being answered. And that's why I think these topics are so fascinating to people.
Yeah. And curiosity is like it's nice too. I'm sure we still have everything. I see something that looks strange. I think I'll read it.
And that's right. Yeah, yeah.
You
So I mean,
know,
some of it is off the wall.
yeah,
When you look at quantum mechanics and all this new stuff, the new
yeah,
physics,
that's
it's all off the wall. It's all off the wall. And scientists will tell you that.
yeah. I enjoy some of that stuff too. It's amazing me. Yeah, I'm more into the UFO, ghost, and I like the read and write horror.
So, what's your
But
favorite book? What is your favorite book on that topic?
um, I have to say, well, like Stephen King was a big fan of mine.
The
I like,
guy's only sold like 700 million books.
well, yeah, no. No, I like Clive Barker too. He is
Uh-huh.
really, Knife Read was cool. It's somebody I like Clive Barker,
Oh yeah, sure.
I used to like him. But,
Dean Koontz is awfully
oh,
good.
yeah, I read a couple of his. Yeah, but I read back in the series, I was in Stephen King a bit.
Yeah.
I've read many of his new ones,
Mm-hmm.
but I should
Well,
get back into them.
You know, I was just watching. I was with a friend of my wife's who'd never seen The Shining, and so I watched The Shining with her, and that's still one of the classic, along with The Exorcist, by the way. You know, one of the really classic horror movies I think of all time.
Right. That's one of my favorites. I can't get my wife to watch it. She won't watch it.
Is that right? Uh-huh.
No.
Yeah, my
She-
wife is pretty much the same. She doesn't like horror movies and those
No,
things.
she really shares horror movie.
Matter of fact, sometimes she says, "Why don't you write about the Boy Scouts or something?" You know, just
Can I make it into a horror story? The Boy
yeah,
Scouts.
yeah. Why don't you go
Camp from Hell.
write about cowboys or something? You know,
Like the Cowboys and the Aliens movie.
there was a movie like that.
Yeah, I can
It really was. So I don't think she was encouraging me to write something like that, though.
Right.
But anyway, I'm really proud of the Unwelcomed. I'm going to hold this up if you don't mind. Can I do this, Scott?
Well, no, go ahead. I'm gonna put all your links or Amazon to buy your book
I'm
too.
trying to get that straight. There we go. The Unwelcomed.
Yeah, there you go.
And you can order on Amazon now. You can order on Barnes and Noble, but it's a pre-order. So you pre-order it,
Right.
and it'll be delivered in a couple of weeks after that. And then
Right.
it'll be distributed in bookstores next month, early next month.
Yeah, I think I have an Amazon at May 30th. So I think I'll be getting that.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
I appreciate it. So when are you going to write a book?
I start them ready. Yeah, but I don't know if it's them.
It's not easy.
Uh,
It's not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. I teach writing at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. I do it online, and I have 10 students right at the moment, all writers, all writing novels. But, you know, to be honest, out of the 10, how many will actually finish that novel? Maybe none. Maybe none.
right.
Yeah, maybe one. But I mean, it just takes a lot of discipline to sit down every day and to write something with quality, you know,
Right.
so you're not just slapping words on a page.
I think I'd be able to write better off just using short stories.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I put in the more book in because, yeah. Sometimes I'll do my train of thought and writing then. I'm getting older and my brain's getting more, you know. According to my disease, I have a brain of a 98-year-old man, so.
I hope you have all that wisdom as well.
Oh my God. I wish. I wish.
You know, I'm gonna close with a quote. I've got a great quote here by Norman Mailer that I put at the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to read it and see what you make of this.
All right.
This is what I think is true. This is pretty true. The devil might be a presence from another universe. We might be fighting an implacable enemy out there, and the devil might be the agent of the implacable enemy, with God as the tired general fighting that war with his own agents of hope.
Wow. That's powerful.
And maybe, and this is where I've come to, I think there is this massive struggle going on between good and evil, and I think the struggle is inside each person. And I think each person in their life has to make the decision, whose side am I on in this war? And I think that that some people really do become evil incarnate. And as in my book, Jack the Ripper, H.H. Holmes, these people really, I think, give their soul away for the pleasure of killing. And they become the agents of evil. Whereas you take a Mother Teresa, you take people that, you know, live an extraordinarily giving and good life, and they're the other extreme. And these are the agents of hope. And I think that battle goes on moment to moment. And I think we're, as human beings, in the middle of that struggle.
Or it may well another plane of existence too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the kind of stuff that fascinates me. I'm always looking for more books to read about that kind of stuff. So I air suggestions that you want to maybe send me an email for me to read.
Sure.
I love that.
Sure, I promise. As a matter of fact, if you want, you know what I can send you is the galleys. I can't send you the book, but I could send you the galleys to the book, which is the book, really. It's just not bound.
Sure.
Yeah, if you'd be interested, I will get that to you. No, I think, the trailers, and I think I gave you something that summarizes it, but this will be the actual book.
Cool. Wonderful. I appreciate it.
I'll get it to you, I promise.
Well, it's such a pleasure having you on tonight.
Yeah, it was fun, Scott. I enjoyed it.
I mean, I was kind of nervous at first, but the more you go in there and talk a lot,
Yeah, you were great. The questions you asked were really on the money.
Okay, cool. I appreciate it.
So thanks so much for having me on.
You bet. Like I said, my pleasure. And
I'm going to get that book to you, I promise.
Right, and I'll have you on in 6 months or so.
You know what? Actually, maybe in June, if you don't mind, maybe we'll get together again.
Oh, yes, June be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I say that because right now the book's in pre-order. You can pre-order it, but in June it'll be out in bookstores and whatnot, and it would be great to just have this discussion again.
Yeah, I have guests out into May anyway, so June would be good.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, Scott.
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks again. I had so much fun with you, Ron.
Okay.
So much fun to talk to you, and I look forward to having you back on again. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Okay, appreciate it. Well, next time, happy horny, everybody. Thanks, Ron.
Okay, take care. Good seeing you, Scott.
You too.